Good evening, or good day, or good afternoon, depending on where you are in the world. Welcome to yet another Tech Thursday. Thank you for joining me. If you didn't already know, my name is David, and I'm your technical expert here in the UK, bringing you Tech Thursdays. And this one is quite a special one. We're a little bit early. You might be able to tell from the background, but we're going to be Halloween themed this month. So because I won't see you all again until the middle of next month, I thought I'd just bring in Halloween early. So it's all going on. And I don't really need any excuse to get Halloween going on. If anybody knows me, I'm absolutely mad about it. So it's not like these things weren't in a box waiting to come out. Anyway, first things first, let's do a tech checkup because I'm very good at messing around with wires just before I come on live and getting the gremlins going. So please let me know in the comments if you can hear me. Just checking that I'm live and the audio's good, and you can give me a shout and just say, yes, we can hear you. And I'll have a look down at the bottom and make sure everyone can hear me. Remember, if you're making a comment, that I'm about 20 or 30 seconds in the future. So it takes me a little minute to get in there and answer it. There are already so many people in the comments, which is absolutely fantastic. And so many people watching already. Let's have a quick look at who's in. I'm going to do like this super fast shout out. So I'm just going to say hi to, and then reel off a load of names, because otherwise I don't get to say hi to a lot of you. So I'm going to say hi to James from Franklin, Steve from Bedford, Howard from Parkgate, Charlie and Dana from Michigan, Roy from Oakham, Stephen from Mid-Bedfordshire. We've got Barry from Ware. I'm sorry if I don't shout your name out. I could go on all night, but if you've said hello to me, hello back. That's about as much as I can do for it, I'm afraid. Okay, so just a quick check. Audio and video is perfect. Thanks so much, Jonathan, for that check. I really appreciate it, because as a lot of you already know, it's just me. I'm on my own here pressing the buttons, so I have to make sure that everything goes really nicely. So as usual with every Tech Thursday, this is an opportunity for you to have a little look at what I'm going to bring to you. And today we're going to look at live composite, but I'm going to have a quick run through of the other long exposure features as well, just to show you the difference between them. Then we're going to do a little spooky demonstration and show you how we can roll in some of the other features of an OM1 and OMDs as well, for that matter, and bring them into live composite as well. Now, of course, just because it's a Halloween special and we're doing live composite, that doesn't mean that you can't pop your questions into the comments, and I will run through them as fast as I can, speed talking and reading and trying to pick out questions where I can, and I'll hopefully be able to answer some more of those as well. So keep those questions coming in, and please, please, please don't take offense if I don't get to your question, because I have to try and balance all of the comments and the talking bit as well. But what I do try and do is come in after the feed, because this is live and you can watch it afterwards. I'll try and come back into the comments and answer anything that was left over. Okay, so let's have a quick look down at the bottom of my comments, do a quick refresh. We've got people in from Austria, from Wales, from South Africa, from Luxembourg, from Maine. Absolutely amazing. I love our global community, by the way, and some names that I know and some that I don't, which is absolutely fantastic. Let's take a look at tonight's topic. So have a little think about your questions. You can pop them in there. If they're not related to live composite, I'll either pick them up as I go along, or I'll try and pick them up at the end. But let's talk about live composite and what is live composite on the OMD and OM system cameras. Well, basically what it is it's a creative tool for long exposures. And ultimately it means that you can relax a little bit when doing long exposures for things such as light painting or star trails and things like that, car trails, anything with moving lights, whereby you'll need to keep the ambient brightness of the scene at a set level, but allow for light movement within that scene and not get any overexposure. That's kind of the key to it. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to switch on an OM1. Bear with me, I've got a few different feeds going on tonight, so I might have to put up a nice placeholder while I switch wires and run around and do things like that. But I've got an OM1 just here, so let me pop this one on screen. Sadly, you still get to look at me as well. And let's bring up the menu and find out where live composite is in the menu. Now, on the OM1, it has its own specific computational menu, and that is menu number 2. So menu number 2 is computational modes. And if we scroll through into page 2, down at the bottom here, we have the bulb/time/comp settings. And that's basically a shortened version of bulb photography, live time, and live comp. And I'm going to show you the difference between those when we move over and do that spooky demonstration. However, there's a few things in this page that I wanted to go over first, just so that you get an idea of what available functionality you have. So let's press OK to get into there. And this is the true bulb lifetime and live composite page. Now, if you're already in the B mode on the dial, if you've got a model that has a B mode on the top dial, not all of them do. So if you've got something like an EM1X or an EM1 Mark III or an EM5 Mark III or an OM1, and you're in that B mode, whenever you press menu, by default, it does take you to the page relevant to those settings, okay? So you can either navigate through the menu when you're not in it, or just press menu when you are in it. Now, you've got a couple of options there that we'll look at explaining. So let's start at the top with bulb/time focusing. Now, when this is on, it simply means that if you're in manual focus and you're utilizing bulb photography or live time, which is another long exposure mode, you will be able to refocus throughout the shot. So if you want to do something creative, you want to defocus halfway through the shot, you can do that if bulb time focusing is on. But if you don't want to do that and you don't want to accidentally knock the focus ring on your lens, then of course you can switch that off as well. Now the next option here that we've got is the bulb/time lifetime timer. It's pretty self-explanatory. If you're using bulb or live time, by default this is set to 8 minutes, and it means that when you run that feature, it will automatically stop. After 8 minutes, it will finish and it will process the image for you. Now, in here, you've got, depending on what model you've got a few different options. The OM1 goes as far as 1 minute timer and all the way through to 30 minutes timer. So if you want to do a really, really long exposure with bulb photography or live time, you probably want to go ahead and select your 30-minute timer so that it doesn't stop automatically halfway through your shot. Now, your next item on here is the live composite timer, because live composite is a separate feature that's kind of moved over to the side because it does so many different things in terms of slightly moving away from long exposure photography, more into that really computational stuff. And the timer for this one is by default set to 3 hours on an EM1 Mark III or an OM1. And that's because those two models can actually go all the way up to 6 hours on a full battery. So you could run live composite to automatically stop after 6 hours, which is great for things like starscapes. If you're going to create a really beautiful long starscape, or if you want to do something really, really long with live composite, you've got up to 6 hours on a full battery. So I'm going to tell you what the next feature is, and I'm going to go across to the comments because I've seen my comment column going crazy at the moment here with lots of hellos and a couple of questions. So let's do this feature in the menu here, which is the bulb time monitor. This is probably the one that I get asked about the most, and that's when people are using bulb or lifetime or live composite, and the back screen, the rear screen, which is what you tend to use when you're doing this rather than the viewfinder, is it goes really dark. Now, if you're doing this kind of thing at night, that's not so bad because you kind of still able to see it because everything else around you is darker. But if you're doing this in a reasonable light or daylight, then that can be quite tricky to see. So the bulb time monitor automatically dims itself to -7 in terms of brightness. That's your rear LCD screen. And if you want to see that at normal brightness, you'll shift this all the way up to 0. Now, you're not going to see those differences today with me on the feed because the feed that you get is basically not a back screen feed. But if we were just looking at the back screen, by default, it would be darker. And some occasions, I would bring it up to 0 so that it's a normal brightness. But you just want to be careful about stray light coming off the back screen if you are doing some true long exposures at night. But let's set that one to 0 and see how we get on with that. So let me just come back into the comments. Again, forgive me if I miss questions because there are so many that come through. I have to try and grab each one as it comes. Let's see what we've got in here. Simon Giddings is asking, would this work for fireworks or lightning? Do you know what, Simon? Live composite is built for those two things, really. Everything else is sort of the gravy around it. The design of live composite means that you can set up the view of your sky in anticipation of your fireworks starting to go off. And you can leave it running because you're setting it for the ambient sort of brightness that you're seeing, maintaining that dark background. When the fireworks do go off, they will appear in the image and they will expose, kind of as they do. You do need to make sure if you're doing things like fireworks or lightning that you allow for the fact that this sudden brightness is going to happen. So I tend to keep the exposure maybe a stop under where I think it should be, just because then when that brightness comes in, it doesn't flood the scene with light. Because with live composite, you can put the light in and light can expose on the scene, but you can't take it away. And I'll show you that when I do a demonstration. So let's have a little look at what else we've got. Phil saying we've got better audio on YouTube. I mean, everyone head over to YouTube. But if you're watching this on Facebook, or, because I'm an old dad now, I have to say the Facebook, because you don't fancy on YouTube, then hopefully the audio is not too bad. Richard's asking, what's the easiest way to focus in the dark? Well, that depends on what you're focusing on. So tonight, because things are really close to me, I can either try and use the AF illuminator that's built into the camera. That will work automatically if I don't switch it off. It's going to give me that red glow to allow the camera a little bit of a helping hand to focus. I could also use a torch to temporarily light something while I get focus and then turn the top torch off. Or, of course, there is always the night vision mode that is built into the camera that will brighten the scene automatically. Now, that doesn't work with some of the long exposure modes, because particularly with live composite, because you need to see what you're going to get with live composite. So in bulb and live time, you can boost the scene, which is what you will use in OMDs. If you've got an OMD, it's called live boost. And in the OM1, you'll use night vision, which I'll show you before we go through. Anyway, but with live composite, you can't have a boosted view because you need to be sure that what you're seeing is the starting point or the ambient exposure that you want to go with. And it's what you see is what you get processed with live composite. It's a great question, that, absolutely. Maria says it's magic. It is, definitely. If I believed in aliens, I would definitely say that it was technology from them. So fantastic stuff. Okay, so let's go ahead and go back to the bulb time menu in my OM1. Let's move on to the next section here. This is, I don't know, sometimes you could almost kind of call it a slightly odd feature in the sense that you have an option for live bulb. So it makes more sense if I explain, those of you that don't know, what bulb is doing. Okay, so when we use bulb, we are pressing and holding down or pressing and locking off a shutter release cable, so that the shutter button is fully depressed for the whole duration of the shot in bulb. And that button needs to be depressed or locked off. And whilst it's depressed and locked off, you're not going to see anything in bulb photography. You get a small counter at the bottom, and we'll see that later on, just telling you how long that exposure has been going on for. Then when you release the shutter, the shot stops and you kind of have to work with what you've got. If we were to switch live bulb on, we would see, whilst that shutter is depressed and locked in, we would see exactly how that exposure is going, which is very similar, if not almost identical, to live time, but there is one strategic difference. So when you enter the live bulb option, it's going to give you this weird page here, okay? And it looks a bit interesting if you've never seen it before, but what this is telling you is that you're about to set a time period that's going to go through. For each of those refresh time periods, for example, if I now go to 1 second on here, then relative to whichever ISO branch I'm using, I will see an updated view of the exposure that's happening every 24, 19, 14, or 9 times, depending on which ISO I'm using. And the way that this works is if you're going from low 80 up to 400, you'll get 24 refreshes. And if I chose 1 second, there'll be a second in between each of those refreshes. And those refreshes are simply an updated view. That's what it's showing us. Every 1 second, it will show us an updated view 24 times, which, if we do the maths, is 24 seconds worth of updated exposure. So we can see what's going on. Now, beyond those 24 refreshes, the camera is still exposing, it's still doing its thing, but we're not seeing anything extra. We're not seeing any extra exposure on the rear screen. So it's really important to make sure that if you're going to use this functionality, that you set the time period between refreshes to an appropriate amount of time that will cover your estimated or even known entire exposure time. Okay, so let's say, for example, you wanted to do a 3-minute shot. Okay, so what you would do is you would break down that 3 minutes into seconds, and then you would divide that by the 24, 19, 14, or 9, and whatever that came to, you would put in here. No, I'm not quick enough to work out what 3 minutes in seconds divided by 24 is, but if you want to put it in the comments, feel free. I should know, I've talked about it enough. But then that means that across that 3 minutes, you would get 24 refreshes at exactly the same period of time in between, and you would see an update exactly how it went all the way through. So, and remember this page and the way that the principles work of this particular feature, because it's going to also relate to live composite, but like I said, with one strategic difference. Okay. Live time is a feature on its own, and it is already set with this delay. If I press OK here, we get exactly the same page that we just saw in live bulb. All right. And the principles are the same. At low 80 to 400, 24 refreshes. At 400 to 800 ISO, 19 refreshes. And at 800 to 1600, 14 refreshes. And at 1600, can't go any higher. That's the highest it can go in that one, is 9 refreshes. Okay, and it works in exactly the same way. The strategic difference for live time is that when you want to start the exposure, you'll press the shutter or press your release cable. You don't need to hold it down. Okay, so you're pressing it once to start that process in live time, and then you press it one more time to stop it. So there's no kind of holding or depressing the shutter any more than you need to. I'm literally glancing through the comments to see if anybody worked out my 3 minutes divided by 24, but nobody did. That's not a nudge, by the way, to work it out. Just keeping an eye on those comments. So your live bulb and live time principles work in exactly the same way. We can put that to 1 second as well, just so that it matches. Now, of course, if you switch this to off, if you switch live bulb to off, then you're going to see nothing. You're not going to see any exposure updates, but the process is happening behind the scenes, so to speak. And then the final setting in here is the composite setting. So this is related directly to live composite. And in effect, it kind of is your shutter speed because live composite is going to take recurring shots at exactly the exposure settings that you give it. So you're going to designate an ISO, you're going to give it an aperture rating, and you're going to choose a shutter speed by inputting the composite settings here. So this one's 1/2 second shutter speed. It's then going to take exposures of those settings consistently. It's going to start taking it, and then it's going to get to the end, and it's going to stop, and then it's going to go back and layer another one exactly the same over the top, only making adjustments for any brighter pixels that have occurred in the concurrent images. Okay, so it's like a stacking thing. It's a live stacking. You only get one image at the end. It can be raw or JPEG, but it's constantly layering those exposures at the same settings over and over and over. You can't start taking things at ISO 400 f2.8 at 1/2 second and then halfway through change your aperture to f8. You can't do that. You have to stay with the one set of exposure settings all the way through, which is why it's super important that before you start, what you see is what you get. So in the demonstration today, I'm going to start with a completely blank canvas. I want 0 exposure. I want no brightness, no light visible in my exposure whatsoever, because I'm going to add light into that in order to create a light painting based on both reflected light and direct light as well. So I'm going to combine the two, which is why it's really important before I do this that because I'm using direct light, I'll put that in front of the camera so that I know it's not going to blow up any highlights, and I know that my settings are going to allow for that direct light to look just right. Okay. Fantastic. I love this. Simon and Bruce, 7.5 seconds per shot. In which case, thanks guys. In which case, in live time, if I was doing 3 minutes, I would have to go for 8 seconds because it's the nearest to 7.5. Brilliant. Oh, Roger as well. Fantastic stuff. I'm sure many of you are 7.5 seconds. Thanks for doing the maths for me. I really appreciate that. Okay, so I'm just going to come back to the main screen just for a second and see what some of you have been saying whilst I've been jabbering away, which I fully appreciate. We've got Sharpie in from Durham. Hello, Sharpie. We've got Carlos in from Asturias. We've got John from Buxton. And we've got Amanda telling me that I'm not old. I appreciate the sentiment, but I kind of feel like I'm getting old. Okay, so let's have a little look. Trevor's popped up a question here. Let's see. What is the best way to autofocus and then switch to manual focus whilst keeping the subject focused? So the best way to do that is that you could probably use the reset lens option, which would stop the lens, the camera from focusing again at infinity once you've autofocused. Or you could use the autofocus plus MF option, which is probably quicker, to be honest with you. So let's go over to the feed. Let's have a little look. So just back in the menu, let's go to the AF option in your OM1, and obviously in your OMD, this is in menu gear A1, I think. And then you've got an AF plus MF option, and that allows you to autofocus using a halfway press or the back button. And you can then further from that point override manual focus with the lens ring, and that's not going to refocus. So you would want to switch AF plus MF on just there. Cool, great question. Thanks, Trevor. Let's see what else we got in here. Oh, great, some more hellos. I love that. We've got Deborah, who's late, but never mind. You're in the party. Fantastic. From Kearney. We've also got Tanzine Pontefract and Marsha. Hello, Marsha. Marsha's in Florida. Fantastic stuff. Okay. Right. So having talked through that kind of page that's relative directly to bulb, time, and live composite, then we're probably going to have a little look at how those differ. But I want to give you a quick guide of how to get into those modes. And also, I'm going to quickly show you some of the tools that I'm going to use today to spread some light around as well. And they're a combination of professional light painting tools and some sort of homemade scamping around as well with like foam and stuff like that. So let's see, we've got an overhead camera on. Let's go to this one here. Oh, my overhead camera is not on. Crikey. Let me see if I can refresh that because something's going on. Let's see. No. Oh, no. You don't want that one. There we go. Well, as I was going to show you my overhead camera, I think I'm probably going to have to switch it off and on again. The problem is, and I did say this at the start, is I have a habit of messing around with cables just before I go live. Let's see if that's done it. No, it's not done it at all. Okay, let's forgo that, and I will talk you through, and I'll hold them up. Yeah, we'll just go in that way. So I'm just going to take that cable out of there. On your camera, if you want to get to bulb, lifetime, live composite, it depends on the model you've got. Okay, any model that has a B mode on the top dial just here, there we go, it's on the other side, B for bulb. You're going to turn it to B, and then it should by default start you in bulb if you've not already been in there and messing about with something else before. But it'll put you into one of the three options. There's only three options that are available in bulb, and you change through those options with the rear dial. And I'll show you that when we do the demonstration. Now, if your camera hasn't got a bulb mode, then you're going to be going into M for manual on the top dial, and then using the shutter dial, which by default will be the rear one, but you could have repurposed it, whichever dial is currently set to be your shutter speed. And you're going to slow that shutter speed all the way down to the 60-second point, and then one more click on your dial is going to take you into bulb, one more for live time, and then one more for live composite. So that's all the way down at the bottom of manual mode. I'm using an OM1 today, so I'm going to be using the B mode. Right, let's have a quick look at some of the things that I'm going to be using today. So I've got torches, obviously my light sources. These are really, really important. I've got two torches. I've got a little skinny one, and I've got a slightly bigger one. And the main thing, the important thing about these torches is that they both have varying power settings, okay? So I can set this one by clicking it multiple times to be low, medium, high power. And it will also do like a flash function as well, which I probably won't use today, to be honest with you. And then the bigger one is exactly the same, but it has a ring around the side that does the same thing, and it changes the power, and it's got a little zoom head on it that I rarely use when I'm doing in studio stuff anyway. But the point to these is that the small one is going to be my fill light for when I'm actually bringing light into the areas that I want to sort of swash and paint over in bigger areas. And I use this this thing here, which is basically a piece of foam with insulating tape wrapped around one side. And the reason why I've done that is because it means that when this is on, you'll see that you can't see any light, but then you can when you turn it around. So it hides the light from the camera. So I've only got one little window of light that's coming out, and you'll see there. It gives a nice soft kind of effect, a little bit of horror lighting for Halloween. And you can just make this up. It's absolutely fine to make up bits and pieces like that out of sort of packing foam and, you know, recycle stuff. It's really good. Now, the bigger one is used with the more professional tools I'm going to use today. These have these little bungs that fit onto the end of it. This is a universal kind of clip, and I use things like these, and these are color painters. So if I pop one on like that, they've all got individual colors on the front of there, and if I turn that on, that's going to give me green. There we go, lovely green, and it's focused in a really nice way so that I can paint it in quite specific areas. And I've got different colors that I can use for that one. I'll be using that one. And then from the same sort of area, but you can also make these yourself if you're very careful, is this one here, which is a fiber optic tool. So this one is a black fiber optic, which means that you only get light from the tips. So if I turn on my light there we go, you can see I'm only going to get light from these tips just there, and I'm not going to see any light through these bits here, other than the very bottom bits, which is where I've broken some off, which is a bit silly really. But you can get these in the clear version where you get light all the way through, and you get them in the black version where it blocks the light up until the end, which is really useful. And if you sort of swash them around, you can kind of get an idea of the sort of effect that we're going to get. So I'll tell you why I'm laughing in a minute, because I have to keep glancing over at the comments to make sure that everyone can still hear me. So, right, so that's my bigger torch, and those are more professional tools, and there's a couple of different ones. You get these little perspex things and all sorts of things like that. They're what I'm going to use today in various different ways. And I'm going to go over to the demo camera in just a second. You guys are going to end up looking just for about 10 seconds at the beautiful image by Hanu, who's one of our amazing light painting ambassadors. A very inspiring image that's taken in the forests and quite suitable to Halloween. So just having a quick check on here about any questions before I go over and do this. So we've got a question from, let's have a look here. Fly Fish and Photo. What a great name. Is there a difference between an ORF and a DNG file? Does one lose any information having to convert an ORF to DNG? Why has OMDS changed the ORF? I'm assuming you're talking about the ORF file in OM1. And well, Fly Fish and Photo, the ORF file changes for every camera. There's a slightly different profile. So every time there's a new generation camera, the ORF file will be different. And sometimes that can take some catching up for software, editing software and other companies before it can kind of be viewed and things like that. But it's kind of part of the process, and it happens for every camera, for every manufacturer. New camera, new file. If you convert to DNG, that's the Adobe's native digital negative file. So you'll lose marginal amount of material, but really not enough for it to be super important. You can just convert that over to DNG, or you could use Olympus Workspace to open any of those files, and that will natively open all of the ORF files from any generation. And it's the nature of the industry, you know, as new cameras come out, new ORF files. For any brand, their raw file changes ever so slightly, and then you have to wait until they're recognized in other software, and it's up to the individual software as to how quick or not that they do that. But yes, you can use a DNG file without losing any too much information. Okay. Skip. Is there a way to avoid the time-filling exercise of saying hello? Not really, because I love to say hello. But if you're watching later on, you can skip through them because I do like to say hello to everyone. We are a big community. It's all Let's see any other questions before I go across to my demonstration. Let's see. Oh, here we go. Marsha, this is a great one actually. Marsha, you're in manual mode and you can't change the shutter speed. You can go no faster than a half a second. This sounds like you have the live ND function switched on. So can't remember what model you've got, Marsha, actually. But what you'll need to do is check at the top of your screen if it's going to be somewhere around here on your screen of the back camera. And if it says ND and then a number next to it, that means you're using the live ND function. Sounds like you've probably got ND32 switched on if it's a half a second. And you'll want to go into the menu and switch that off. So in an OMD, that's going to be in menu, shooting menu number 2 and live ND. And then in an OM1, it's going to be menu, shooting tab 2, computational modes, live ND. And I'm pretty sure that's exactly what it is. Okay, so the gang over at OMSYSTEM.Cameras just popped up a question saying, can you help us with the bracketing self-timer info? I'm going to need a little bit more information about what the question is regarding to it. But of course, if you bring me that information, I will jump on it. Okay, let me put up this beautiful image from Hanu, who is our light painting ambassador. He's got some fantastic stuff out. He had a video go viral of him painting some swans on a lake. It was absolutely gorgeous. So keep an eye out for him. If you go over to My Olympus, you'll see his stuff on our page there. If you sign up to the newsletter, there's loads of stuff that goes around. Hanu will be featured regularly on there. So keep an eye out for that. This is my, sorry, this is another time killing exercise for me because I needed to get up and plug in some different cables that I was already using. So let me pop this feed in here. There we go. So it's going to look a bit spooky. I need to get it darker. Oh, let's make it really dark. So I've just got this nice gentle glow. And I wanted to introduce you all to Colin over there. Colin is my model for the evening. He was an absolute bits when I asked him to do it, as you can see. So Colin's going to help me out. His mate Boris, who helped me out last year, he's still upstairs. We need to thaw Boris out for Halloween. But this is Colin. So Colin's going to help me out. And what I want to show you here is pretty much exactly what I'm going to do from start to finish. I've got the OM1 and I'm in manual mode. Okay, so if you've got an OMD that doesn't have the bulb mode, you'll also need to go into manual mode. And you'll use the rear shutter here and you'll slow down the shutter speed all the way down to 60 seconds. Hello, Colin. You brightened up a bit there, old boy. And then after 60 seconds, one more click on the shutter is going to take you into bulb mode. Now, I don't need to do that because I've got a B mode. So I'm going to switch to B mode on my camera. And there we go. Now I'm in bulb. And I'm just going to show you, but also by using that rear dial, now I'm in bulb, I can go from bulb to live time to live comp. Now you'll see a difference here. When I go from bulb to live time, there's no difference in the view that you see. It's quite boosted. It's giving me an approximate view. It's artificially brightened. It's not what you see is what you get. It's not going to be the final image because the camera doesn't know how long I'm going to leave the shutter open for when I'm using bulb or live time. But when I switch over to live composite, it will change, and I will come to that. So let's do a long exposure shot in bulb. Now, first things first, before I set off with this, I'm going to tell you I am going to use a remote release cable. I'm just going to plug it in now. I'm using an RMCB2, which you can use for any of the OMDs and the OM1. You could also get yourself an RMWR1, which is the new Bluetooth release that will work with the OM1. Or other brands available as well, of course. So I'm going to use my RMCB2 to trigger this. Now, first things first, I'm going to actually go into the menu and I'm going to turn off the long exposure noise reduction. The reason for that is thus. I'm shooting in RAW. Okay, so just press OK. You'll see down at the bottom, I'm shooting actually in JPEG plus RAW. Okay, now because I'm shooting RAW, I'm going to do my noise reduction myself. All right, I'm going to do it in post-production. You don't have to. You can allow this long exposure noise reduction to apply. But what you do need to know is that if you leave it on, you're going to have to wait the same amount of time at the end of your shot that it actually took your shot to expose. Okay, because that's applying a dark frame. So as you see, when I pressed menu there, whilst I was in bulb mode, it took me straight to the bulb menu. I need to press menu one more time to come back from that, and then one more time again to come into the main menu. So it's 3 menu pushes when you're in bulb mode to get out of all those settings. And then we're going to go to shooting menu number 1, page 3, and noise reduction. So that's set to auto at the moment, which means the camera's waiting for me to do a shot over half a second long to then apply the equivalent shutter speed shot in a dark frame on top. I'm going to switch it off. Like I said, for one reason, I'm shooting in RAW and I'll do it myself. But also, two, you don't want to have to listen to me talking whilst we just see a dark screen doing nothing for 30 seconds. So, with that switched off, let me guide you through everything that I'm going to do. And it's not going to be very impressive. So, Colin, I'm really sorry. These first couple of shots, they're not going to be portfolio shots for you, I'm afraid. They're just going to be rough shots there and thereabouts. Now, you'll see here that I have actually cut this frame down by going into the aspect ratio and putting in a false portrait aspect ratio at 3:4. So if I put in the whole thing, then you get all these other bits and pieces that's not very nice to see on a demonstration. So I'm just going to shut it down to 3:4. I'm just going to move my camera ever so slightly. It just tidies things up for you to see, okay? Now, as I halfway press my shutter release, you'll see that red flash. That's the AF illuminator that's helping me out here. I'm going to move my AF point with the joystick just over to Colin's face. Hi, Colin, don't you worry. Colin, I'm going to need you to stay really, really still because this is a long exposure after all. Okay, don't move, buddy. Thanks very much. So now I'm in bulb mode, standard bulb mode. I am going to press and hold the shutter down, or I have a lock button on my RMCB2 remote. I could lock it, but I'm just going to press and hold it, okay? So halfway gets me my focus, full press. And now this is it. I'm in bulb. My camera's exposing at the settings that I had set. And they're irrelevant at this stage because it's not the right scenario for me to be using bulb anyway. And I get a counter at the top of the screen on the OM1. If it was an OMD, this counter would be down at the bottom right-hand corner, but it's just letting me know how long that exposure has been running. Once I'm happy that I want to end the exposure, I then either unlock on my cable release or I lift my finger off the shutter, and that saves the image, and we can have a quick look at what came out there. So in playback, it's not actually, give or take, a badly exposed image. It's a little bit dark, but unfortunately, we had no idea where that was going, okay, because we couldn't see it. So if we're to apply the functionality of live bulb, let's just go press menu. Live bulb pops up straight away. I'm going to pop in there 1 second. So I'm going to get a refresh rate of 1 second in between each shot. Now, if I press OK and I look at the ISO that I have set for this shot, it's at ISO low 100. So because it's between low 80 and 400, I should get 24 refreshes. So I'm going to do the same thing again. Press and hold the shutter release, but instead of having just a blank screen with a timer on it, this time I get a screen that is exposing and showing me that refresh every 1 second with my timer, with a live histogram, and with a display count telling me how close I am to ending my refreshes. Now, as you can see, this is just exposing ever so slightly every second. It's a slow exposure. I've done this on purpose so that we can see it. But when it gets to 24, the display count disappears to tell me that what I'm seeing now is not what the final image will be. My histogram's also stopped exposing as well. It stopped progressing along. I just have the timer left. So I'm kind of in the dark now, and this is where I would have had to work out roughly how long a time period of refresh I would have needed for the total shot. I'm leaving this on purpose a little bit longer to show you the difference between what we saw last in terms of refreshes and what will actually come out at the end, okay? So this has gone all the way up to almost a minute, and I'm just going to let it get to the 60 seconds, and then we'll release it. There we go. That's processing. We'll have a quick look, and then that will be much brighter than our initial final refresh that we saw whilst we were live shooting, okay? So that's how the live section of bulb and time works. Now, if I cross over to live time using my rear dial, 1 click, live time now, and I'm actually going to reduce my aperture wide open, just so that this exposes a little bit quicker and you see how this happens now. If I press menu, I get that same functionality. How long do I want in between each of these refreshes? I'm going to press the button up scale 1 second again. In fact, let's go for 2 seconds on this one. Press OK. A little halfway press to leave the menu quickly and get back to my live view. Now, all I need to do is halfway press to focus or manually focus at this stage. And then fully press once and I can let go of the shutter. I don't need to hold this down. Now, every 2 seconds, I'm getting that update, the histogram update, the live view update, the display count update. You can see this is progressing much faster than the previous one because I widened that aperture up a little bit. Very, very bright, but I've got control over it, so I can say that's where I want to be. Press the button one last time to stop the exposure. And there's our massively overexposed Colin. I am so sorry. I promise you, Colin, you will get some good profile pictures for your MySpace page out of tonight. What do you mean, Colin, MySpace isn't a thing anymore? Okay, right. Sorry about that. So anyway, back to what we're doing. That's live time and bulb converted into live bulb as well. Now, I'm just going to leave that there for a second and quickly look at some of the comments just to make sure that we're doing all right. Fantastic. Marsha's fixed. ND filters on. Problem solved. Love that. Fantastic. Ben over at the Narrowband channel. Hello, Ben. Hope you're okay, mate. You have to turn it off for astro photos. Yeah, I imagine you do, because everything will be manual dark frames with you. Fantastic. That's the noise reduction feature that that Ben's at the Narrowband channel is turning off. Okay, so let's have a look now. Let's now move this on from lifetime and live bulb. Let's go into live composite, and you'll see the screen change now. Okay, so one more turn on that rear dial into live composite. And what you can see there is now I'm getting a live exposure view of what it's going to look like. And I'm getting a live exposure meter at the bottom, which is showing me that it's minus 2.3, minus 2.7 stops under. Okay, so underexposed by 2.3 or 2.7. It's fluctuating as I move around the room and cast a shadow on things. Now, if I was to change anything now, that will also change. I'm actually going to change my aperture again. I'm going to go back up all the way to f8. And you can see now my exposure meter is flashing wildly at me going, what are you doing, you crazy fool? This is going to be more than 3 stops underexposed. That's what the flash means. It means it's got to 3 stops. Can't show you any more than that. It's at least 3 stops underexposed. But that's fine, because I'm going to be applying the light in here. So I'm in control. I want to start off with a completely underexposed image. Now, I showed you my light painting tools earlier, and I'm just going to pop a couple of those into the view. And what you'll see, hopefully, when I do this, is you'll see how that light looks at those settings. So this is the optic fiber light. You can see that I can make out the difference between the fibers. That means that light works well. I'm going to pop that one down. And I'm going to bring in my my sort of larger painting bit, which has got my homemade bit of foam around it. And then I'm just going to use that to, let's just turn that up a bit, just to shine on. And you can see that as I move it around there, that is actually having an effect on Colin. It's lighting him up. And if I do this, you can just see the end. This is my tool here. But if I do that, I can actually pass it in front of the camera. And the camera doesn't see anything other than darkness, which is really, really good. So I can kind of do that. Really, really useful. So now that I've tested those sections of my light painting tools, I know that they work, and I know that they're not going to overexpose too much for me. I can start putting things together, okay? Whenever I do light painting on a product, which sadly, sorry, Colin, you do come under the product category, I always use the same settings. I'm going to use ISO low 100, sometimes ISO 200, depending on how bright my light painting tools are. I use f8 because I want to get the depth of this in, and there's nothing behind it to worry about anyway. And then I press menu in live composite, and I choose a half a second. Half a second recurring shutter speed, press OK, and a little halfway press to get back to the live view nice and easily. Now, if you were doing starscapes at this stage, you could also use Starry Sky AF. What you would do is you would press OK, go ahead and find your focusing modes, go down to the starry AF, press OK, and this would form part of the second button press that you're doing. So there are literally 2 button presses to get started and 1 button press to stop on Live Composite. The first button press does nothing but assess the scene for a final dark frame. So I'm going to press that once. There you go. It took a half a second dark frame. That's because I chose half a second as my recurrent shot. The next button press halfway. Oops, I pressed it too many times now. That's part of the problem with jabbing away at a remote cable. So let's do it again. 1 press for that dark frame, and then because we're on Starry Sky AF, using the back button for AF on to do Starry Sky. Now you'll notice that it boosted up there and it got a little bit brighter, and then it went to lock on. This is too close for Starry AF. So Starry AF is not for Colin, unfortunately, but if you were doing the stars, this is where you would do it, and it would be that second push that you would initiate the AF on for Starry Sky. So from the back button, I'm going to switch this back to single AF, and that's going to reset my mode here to do 1 press for noise reduction and a second press to focus and start, which is exactly what we've done there. Now I'm going to hang up my remote very gently. And as you can see here, there's a little bit of light in there, but not enough to worry about. So what I tend to do now is I'll get my smaller torch with the foam diffuser over it, and I'll come in and I'll start to add in some light. So I'm just going to come in real gently from the edges, adding in light where I want it to be. And I'll probably do it, but you've got to be real careful that you don't get your own light in the scene. Okay, so that's really, really careful. Like that. Now, the good thing about Live Composite is that I could stop and start this very quickly because I can see exactly what's going on. But I'm just going to put a bit more light in to Colin. I'm going to bring some in from the side, and I want to be real gentle with this light because I'm going to add some more colors as well. So there's some pumpkins in there. Just going to light those up nice and gentle. Bring those in there. And it is about taking your time, and you really can take your time with Live Composite because there's really nothing's going to go off, you know, as long as no other light comes in. If one of my children walked in now and switched on the light in the room, that would completely destroy the image. And I'll show you how that happens in a second as well. So just bringing that in nice and gently. Obviously, we don't want too much light. This is a nice eerie scene. So we're going to just pull in some more light just on the top there. And that's it, okay? Then you can start to add more creative aspects to it, okay? So in this sense, I'm going to add a little bit of color. I'm going to add in, I've got an orange color here. That's quite sort of Halloween-y. I'm going to just direct this, oh, sorry, yellow. I'm going to direct this sort of around Colin's head. Now I've just popped it onto my slightly larger torch. I'm going to use the lowest power possible because you start low. If you start low, you can always get higher. So I'm just shining it on Colin's head at the moment, and it's not enough. So that means I get to turn up the power a little bit. So then we're going to bring in, there we go. Just see that light coming down. I'm just going to paint it gently down the left side and onto the hand here, just to give that a little bit of color on that side. I know it's a bit gruesome, but it's Halloween, so we've got to enjoy it. And I'm going to change the color up now, and we're going to go for a green. And just to show you, we can now add in a little bit of green onto the other side. We can just see that coming in here nice and gently. And you can be really precise with this if you just cover your light and only let out enough that you want to see. There we go. A little bit of light on there. And we can just kind of bring that into play. Now, I'm not going to overcook this at all, but what I want you to look at here is that this has been going on now for over 3 minutes. It's taken 400, now more than 400 half-second shots to lay over the back of each other. And now I'm just going to do, there's a little bit of blank negative space in the background. I'm just going to see what my optic fiber can do in terms of this one and see if we can kind of make a sort of spooky kind of thing going on back there. Again, I always start at the lowest power so I can turn my power up. You don't want to add too much in. There we go. It's a little bit of light. And the slower you go with the light, the more sort of mysterious that effect's going to be. Just going to bring that in there as well. And you can keep going in and adding these in different places and checking where you are as well, because I can see obviously now we've got a really kind of empty space over there. We can go ahead and fill that in. And then this section here as well. So you can just keep adding to it and doing whatever you like. And like I say, don't overcook it. Just keep it as simple as you like, or as abstract as you like. And then when you're happy with whatever you've done, you go ahead and find your shutter button and you press it one final time to stop that process. Okay, let's just play that back there. Perfect stuff. And let's go in to, let's have a look at this one. There we go. Perfect stuff. It's really bright, that, when you just come back out of the darkness. So I apologize for me squinting. Let's have a quick look at some of the questions to see if anything's come through direct to that. Terry, that's a great question. Terry asked, why you're not on native ISO? Terry, I'm manipulating that ISO so that I get the darkest possible scene. So I could select ISO 200, but it would probably, because I've got all these other things on for the studio today, it would let too much ambient light in. So I'm kind of manipulating a combination of aperture and low ISO to do that. That's why I didn't use native. Let's have a look. Ben asked, is it possible to have it do Starry Sky AF check every few minutes during the process? No, there's no refocusing. There's no automatic refocusing process on it. But that's not a bad idea. You write that down, Ben. Sadly, not at the moment. Let's see. Any more questions that we've got that were related to that? Looks like cobwebs. It does in the background, but there are some cobwebs actually in there as well. So I did try that, Scott. Definitely put some in there. Excellent stuff. Right, let's have a look. Ralph, this is a great question. Right, when you do this and record 400, 500 shots, does that add to your shutter count? No, it absolutely doesn't, because this is a constant open electronic shutter option. So even if you were to dig into the depths of the brain of your camera, it would still only show as one electronic or silent shutter actuation. So no, you're not burning away at the camera. Okay, so that's Colin. Isn't he fantastic? Round of applause for Colin. Thank you very much. But what we want to do now, real quickly, is we're almost coming up to an hour, but I want to very quickly, using those principles, show you how you can also use some additional features of your OMD or OM1. And that is actually by using the art filters that are built in as well. So you can use art filters in conjunction to live composite. I have to apologize because a cat has just walked into this room who was supposed to be outside. So if you hear any noise, it's me falling over a cat in the dark. But that's the joys of being live, I suppose. So what I'm going to show you is how to put that art filter addition on into live composite. Now, of course, if you're shooting RAW and JPEG, the RAW is always going to be the RAW file. There won't be any art filtration happening to it, but the art filtered JPEG will come out as well because I'm shooting RAW and JPEG. So let's go back over to the feed. So Colin, let me switch off this SXS light. And then let's just see exactly what we can get out of this feed. So what I think I'm going to do is I'm going to pull in a tighter crop for Colin. So I'm going to go back to live time, and I do this quite often just to sort of frame and compose and see what's going on. So I'm going to just make some adjustments to the composition. I'm going to change that aspect ratio back to the standard native 4:3, and I'm going to just, let's really kind of zoom in and get a nice tight crop on the old boy just there. All right, let's grab some focus. There we go. Hello, Colin. It's time for your close-up, buddy. Now then, let's now go back to live composite because we've done the framing. Oops. There we go. I'm not going to adjust any settings whatsoever. But what I'm going to do is press OK. I'm going to go over to the picture mode, which is currently set to natural. And then I'm going to go in through there and find a filter that I feel is going to work. Now, you'll get this kind of look on all of them. You'll get to see exactly what's going on. Oh, that's a good start. Let's try grainy film. This is a black and white high contrast filter. It's going to be slightly different. My favorite one I'm going to leave to the end. Okay, so black and white, so it doesn't really matter about using any color in terms of colored light, but I can just use my diffuser to highlight different areas. So here we go. This is going to give me a filtered grainy film look. I'm going to press my button once for noise reduction, halfway push, and then fully press to start that process. And then I'm going to go in with my diffused light, and I'm going to bring some hopefully bring some light into Colin, and let's just bring him out a little bit here. Make it really delicate. We can go really dramatic on this one. Just bring a little bit out on that side, not so much on the other side, just enough to see what's going on. A little bit from the front and a little bit from the top. There we go. Let's bring some nice highlight into the top of his bonds there. There we go. And that's all I would do. This is literally very, very quickly using that art filter, grainy film, bringing in a little bit of light, focusing on something that looks cool in the frame. It's a nice spooky picture. Press the release button to stop the process. And there you go. There is our fantastic finished effect. And the JPEGs are superb. If you're going to use them, you've got nice quality. You can see the cobwebs, and it's really, really nice and well filtered. Now, my favorite one does have a little bit of color in it. So I'm going to go back in to my live view. I'm going to go from Art 5 all the way through. You could do any one of these you wanted. Vintage is always a good one. But I'm going to use Bleach Bypass. This is a great filter that we added in not very long ago to some different models. So I'm going to use Bleach Bypass. The process is exactly the same. One push for the noise reduction, halfway press and full press for focus, and start the process. Let's come in with a little bit of standard neutral light and see what happens here. Come on, Colin, wakey, wakey. Let's bring this in for you. And a little bit more light on the torch. Here we go. Let's really start to bring that in gently, gently. And when I say gently, gently, just what I'm doing is I'm going from a distance to closer towards. Here we go. A little bit on top, a little bit of highlight. There we go. Nice and dark on one side, but can you see how these colors are just there? They're very muted, very, very muted now. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to just turn that light off. I'm going to bring in a colored spot. I think I'm going to use the green. And I'm going to gently try and put some color just into the front of Colin's face. And let's see if I can get away with this without creating too bright. It's just coming through a little bit. Let me turn up the power in the second torch. Let's go again and just bring in, here we go, just coming in nicely here, just to the side, a little bit of color. The beauty of live composite is that you don't need to rush, and I just love that we can do this without rushing. You can just take your time, just painting in those different areas. There we go. And then, you know, I would say enough's enough. You keep it nice and simple. Press the release button one more time. And that ends the shot. We can play back that and have a little look at the final result. And yes, yeah, it's a JPEG, as is the previous one. Let's have a quick look at that. There you go. That's the previous JPEG. This is a JPEG as well. But it's exceptional quality. It's giving you that flexibility and that creativeness. And to Paul Terry's question up there, can this be done in RAW? The whole process of live composite and live bulb can be done in RAW, but this filtered version where I've added in an art filter will give you a RAW that doesn't have this effect, plus a JPEG that does. So yes, there we go. So I hope that was exciting, because that this live marks the start of Halloween in my house. I'm telling you, I'm going out there tomorrow. I'm dressing the whole house for a whole 2 weeks, making it as spooky as possible. So this is kind of my marking point to go through with that as well. Let's come back into the main section. That's my hour done. Probably the quickest hour of a Tech Thursday I've had in ages. It went super, super quick. I'm going to pick up some of the other questions that have come through, and I will try and pop back into comments later on. So feel free to pop comments into the actual comment section of the YouTube video once it isn't live. And I will try and go back in there and help you out with any of those questions. Let's see. We've got Jonathan saying the settings have changed what light painting can do. To be able to see what you're doing while painting is amazing. Yes, it's one of the reasons why our amazing light painting ambassador Hanu came over to us to do this kind of thing, because you can see exactly what's going on. And there's some really, really amazing things that people are making with live composites because you can see all this happening. Oh, thanks, Roger. I got lots of clapping from Roger. Perfect stuff. Thank you. Look, I even managed to impress the OM System team. There we go. In the background there, the OM System team are saying that it looks so cool. I think that's how Michelle. Thanks, Michelle. Thank you very much. Let's see. Roger's asked if you can walk in front of the camera wearing dark clothing to light paint distant objects. You absolutely can, yeah, providing your settings are right. Suspiciously, and an interesting twist of how things go in the night, I do have a balaclava that covers everything apart from my eyes. And then I wear dark gloves and things like that so that I'm completely underexposed in the image and I can move around quite easily. The one thing you do need to bear in mind is if you're using a light painting tool, such as this, and it's anywhere near your body, if you've got your skin exposed, it's going to reflect off your skin. And also, if you've got one of these, a smartwatch, then every time you turn it up and turn your hand, that smartwatch is going to light up, and you'll see that in your image as well. So either take your smartwatch off, cover it up, other things like that. Loads of things that you do have to think about. And just then, obviously, I turned my smartwatch around and it's doing all sorts of things. So that's the thing that you want to avoid seeing in there in your light painting. Oh, I'm sorry, I missed that one, Simon. Didn't do the red spotlight for the eyes. Could have done that. I've got some really narrow spots as well that we could have done that with. Don, this is a great question. So I'm going to answer a couple anyway. We're just going to go for it for this one. We've got lots of great questions in there. What does eco mean? So if you've got eco on your camera, that means that you've set the sleep mode settings to its shortest possible setting. So it's going to go to sleep very, very quickly. So check your sleep settings for eco if you don't want that. Yes. Oops, wrong one. Terry, yes, you can add these filters to an image in post-production in RAW. The benefit of doing it in camera is that you can see how it's looking. So some of those art filters react in a really weird way, particularly things like grainy film and dramatic tone. They react to light in a really odd way. You can massively overcook dramatic tone with just a little bit of light. So it's good to be able to see it happening. But you've then got the raw file anyway if you wanted to do any adjustments and then apply that filter in post on OM Workspace because you'd seen how it was in real life anyway. Okay, so definitely not a magician. If I was a magician, the kids might do as I tell them more often because I could do a few magic tricks. And yes, absolutely. The video, if you're watching live, you can watch the replay. It's not going to go anywhere once we finish here. It just takes a few minutes and then you can go back and you can watch it from the start and find your way through it as well. So thanks, Deborah. Let's have a quick look. Anything else that we've got in terms of questions? I don't really want to miss if we can avoid it, but I think that's all gone. I did see one question further up, but I can't find it now. Someone was asking where the tools came from, the professional stuff. And like I said, you can make your own. Definitely, if this is something new to you, literally have a bit of, create a bit of mischief with your craft stuff and make your own and use diffusing paper and colored cellophane and things like that. Wrap them over torches. But if you do want to get some professional ones, there are a couple of companies out there. The ones that I use tonight are by a company called Light Painting Brushes, and they seem to be really popular with the professional light painting crowd as well. They're exceptionally good. They're not cheap, so bear that in mind. Your most important thing when you're going to do something like that is the torch. Flashlight, to globalize the terminology. Torch or flashlight, depending on where you're from. This is really important. Get one that has a variable power output and preferably can be recharged so that you're not wasting batteries, or if you do have to use batteries, use rechargeable ones. Super, super important. Right. Thank you again, obviously, for coming and sitting in on an hour's worth of Tech Thursday. I really appreciate all of your input. I hope that this was an interesting show for you and that it's inspired you to go out and have a little play with it. Check out some of our ambassadors that do use it. Like I said, Hanu Hutamo is one of the ones that is producing some beautiful things at the moment using live composite, and it has so many different applications. So have a little look. And as always, if you need anything at all, your technical experts all over the world, Europe, UK, North America, everywhere, we're there to help you out. So have some fun, but don't get stuck on your own. For now, I'll say goodbye, and I will see you next month for another Tech Thursday. Cheerio for now. Bye-bye.